Welcome back, everyone, to the first episode of the year for Paddle and Fin. The Noob Show is breaking in 2023 with we're opening up. So it's been a great holiday season for us here, Paddle and Fin, but we have a ton of great stuff coming this year. Thanks to Brian for that awesome new intro that he put together. So we're going to really try and up our content game this year. And so I'm excited for all the different things that we have to show you guys and, just make 2023 our best year yet. So again, thanks so much for tuning in. I have to say it was nice to have a little bit of a break over the holiday season there, but it definitely is nice to get back and start talking fishing again. Kind of excited to hear from the listeners what you guys got for Christmas, or the new equipment or the things that you got to try out. I got quite a few cool things. My brother-in-law made me an awesome net. So shout out to him for that. I'll definitely show you that to you guys later. But it's just been an interesting time. Now, my co-host Susie is feeling a little under the weather to start the year off, so she's not going to join us for this episode. But we miss her, and excited to have her back as soon as possible. She's just feeling a little, like I said, under the weather this evening. So without any further ado, I want to introduce tonight's guest. He has been on the Noob Show before and has a ton of great knowledge. He's been a guide on the Susquehanna River for quite a while, and I've heard nothing but amazing things about him. Jeff Little sings his praises, and that right there tells me all I need to know. But you definitely check out the Facebook link at the bottom to check out their content, because these guys catch fish year round, like beautiful fish. It's just crazy. There's this constant posts of tons of fish being caught, and as someone who struggles during the winter months to catch fish, seeing the amount and the quality of fish that these guys are putting up almost on a daily basis is just super impressive. So I haven't had the opportunity to get out with him yet, but I'm really chomping at the bit to do that. So I'd just like to bring on Chris Gorsuch from Real River Adventures. Welcome back, Chris.
How you doing?
Not too bad. How about you?
Doing very well. And I agree. It's kind of nice to get a break, during the holidays. I kind of stopped fishing a couple of days before Christmas and really just, rested my foot. I've got a stress fracture on my foot. And, but as soon as the new year hit, I was itching really bad. I didn't get out to the second. Usually I'm out the first. And then I fished probably, I think it was 3 days in 5 days in 3 different states, just really, 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 energized to go for the year. And people ask me, how long are you going to do this? It's like the day I wake up and I don't feel like getting in the boat will be the day I'll start to plan the end, because I am every day, 200 plus days a year. I am so excited to be on the water. And when that passion dies, I'll look for something else. It's how I ended my my engineering career, and it's how I'll end my fishing career, if it ever does.
Interesting. And you said you went to 3 different bodies of water. Was that just to try things out, or just
it's I won't use the word bored, but I don't like to fish the same stuff all the time. And if you're a guide on a river, you have to have a home base, right? So it's just, and I will launch from multiple places. It's tough to leave a good spot, but I'll try it. But when you're talking about this time of year, I've got so many fun spots that I really enjoy fishing. The Delaware is very important to me. I cut my teeth on it as a young adult, and I learned it because it was only 30 minutes from my house, from 1985 to 2013, I think. So I spent a lot of time on that river. So usually I try to catch my first bass there. And that happened. So just happy to hit the Delaware. We launched out of a New Jersey launch about mid-river, and had just a fun day. Not high numbers, but a lot of good quality fish and some fun times with friends. And then, got back to the Susquehanna, of course, and hit the standard holes. And the river was high, but fish were there. And the river temperatures, they've really come up the last couple of weeks. So it's kind of cheating, when you get into the 40s in January. Usually we're fishing mid 30s, maybe 36, 34, 35, something along those lines, which I actually prefer. I don't like it when it's below 35, although, it's a challenge, but I would rather have it right at 35 to 38 much more than 40 because I just think they start to spread out more at that temperature. But
interesting.
Got a chance to fish down on the Potomac, enjoyed that, went out with a buddy Floyd, and just fun because I see these guys and I talk to them during the year, but we just don't have time to fish until my off season. So I do a lot of running around in January until the ice comes.
Gotcha. I know I actually got out to fish on the 2nd as well on the Susquehanna, and it was just luck because we had a lot of ice flow down here, and it had dammed up at the dam right below where I normally fish up until I could see the edge of the ice flow, right where I launch. And if it would have been up any further, I wouldn't have been able to launch. And I had to actually break through a little bit of kind of crust with my paddle to get out where I did go out. But the hole that I usually go to this time of year was just north of where the ice the whole ice flow was. So I was really fortunate to be able to fish. And I really was surprised. I didn't realize that it was even there until I think maybe the 27th or 28th after, Christmas. I drove down to the river and I was just going to check it out. And I was like, holy cow, there's ice everywhere. So
yeah, it's amazing. I think what happened that really blessed us on the Susquehanna and the Juniata for that matter is we had that just before the cold got here. We got a big storm and it rose the river quite a bit. And, technology wise, there's no real way to follow how much the river's going to rise or fall during the nighttime. But when you have that much volume, no matter how cold those nights were, I think we had a couple nights that were right down near zero. Mm-hmm. And having that extra volume, even though the river, froze in spots, it took, because all that volume, it held the temperature. And then as it went down and the sun came out and we got into above the 30s, we really dodged a bullet there.
No, and it warmed up quick. Now the water that I was fishing was on the colder side because we were just north of that ice flow. I don't know. I imagine that had something to do with it, but we were just like 36, I think was what my
that's how it was for it was prior to the holidays. It was right around that 35, 36, 37. And then after the holidays, it held pretty tight there. And then I think that my Delaware temperature was right around 37 to 38. And then when I was on the Susquehanna, it was when you had all the ice flow. We hit the peak on Tuesday. It peaked in the Harrisburg area on Tuesday. So I think we were closer to 38 at that time. But that was Tuesday. But by Thursday and Friday, the temperatures were up into the low 40s. So a little too high for me, but it's nice. It brought a lot of people out.
Yeah. And then it makes it, not that 36 is horrible on the water, but any warmth I can get, I'll take. But
yeah, the problem when you get into the 40s, especially like anything even close to like 44, 45, and the river's dropping, these fish start to disperse, and then they're not held up. So now, rather than 90% of the fish being in, that 5% of the water, it starts to go to 20, 25% of the water. And it's, you could be off by 20 yards or not far enough out in the current because, it's wintertime. You're thinking you want to fish really, really slow in the slack water, and come to find out those fish have moved into the current because we've got these, thirly springtime temperatures. So it's just, I would much rather have it steady. Give me 38, 39 degrees steady, and I'm happy.
Well, and that brings up kind of the whole point of why I really wanted to have you on the show tonight was to really talk about some of your strategies for locating bass in the wintertime. You hear about wintering holes and stuff like that. Jeff Little talks a lot about that in his videos. And, I'm fortunate enough to know where one or two in my area is more through word of mouth than stumbling upon it on my own. But for those folks out there who maybe are shy about asking for information or just want to try and learn that process themselves, can you break down a little bit of kind of what you're looking for? You mentioned the slower, more kind of static water that's not high flow.
Yeah, so there's a history here, right? So you heard from word of mouth from places that were popular or well known, and I think some of our problems today with people who have been going out, they're looking at what they did, for years and years and years, and hitting these, I'll call them community holes, and they're either producing or not producing, or they're producing fish, but not in the numbers that they're used to, which is really the general case. And a lot of these holes were, you know, the best, deepest, most protective areas, right? So, you know, I'll just pick on one location, which is Fort Hunter, still holding fish, still can catch fish there. But the days of 30 boats going and everybody catching between 50 to 100 bass in late November, December are just not there. I mean, not that you can't do it a time or two, but you're not going to be able to go up in the big pool where the water's most protected and smash those fish all day long. It just doesn't, it's just not there anymore. And part of it is, I believe, is, you know, because the resident fish have learned that they've got a new competitor in the water that eats just as much as they do. And smallmouth bass, I don't think like to be overrun by other fish. I've seen it in the shad season. I see it during striper season. And now that we have the flatheads in the river, I'm seeing that it's changing our winter bite. So, you know, it's still a great winter hole. It just is full with more catfish than it was ever before. So you have to look in different spots. So, you know, I'm fishing shallower water than I've ever fished before in the winter. I'm still not fishing 2 feet by any means, but I fished enough 3.5 to 4 foot holes and found, you know, piles of fish that to know that they don't need to be in 10 foot of water for you to catch them in the wintertime. So
Interesting.
you're looking, you know, what my grandfather taught me, you know, and especially in the springtime was, you know, being an all around outdoorsman. I don't think there was anything he didn't chase, but we would always look where the ducks were, right? So look where the wood ducks are when the water is low, when the water's slow. You know, usually they're in the water. There's usually current, but there's not a lot of current. So if you get to a spot in the river in the springtime and you see these wood ducks start to, you know, skitter out of there, you know, that's going to tell you that that's one of those areas where they can, you know, hang around and forage and, you know, commune and everything else that they do, but they're not going to be in that fast water. So that offers them safety. It offers them, you know, the kind of flow you're looking for. The other thing is on a cold December day when you can't fish, you know, drive around and look and see where the ice is. Look and see where the ice forms first. Look, you know, that's usually going to show you where the ice forms first. That's going to show you the flow. It's going to show you where those slower areas are. And then, you know, having some kind of a depth tool, whether it's whether you're using your fishing rod or, you know, your paddle, or if you have electronics hooked up, just being able to feel, you know, and understand where the water is. If it drops behind a ledge and it goes from 2 to 3 feet or, you know, inches to 4 or 5 feet and it pulls up behind it, you need to look around a little bit and say, okay, if this river comes up 4 feet, are these fish protected? So that's why a lot of our areas are on banks, behind islands, you know, on true large structures of rock, whether it's a ledge or just a giant boulder. And that's where, you know, the bass have congregated, and that's where they go to in the wintertime. You know, bottom contour, bottom type is important. A lot of guys, you know, don't like mud, but I mean, I've caught fish in mud. But I would say generally it's cobble. It's, you know, it's more of a harder bottom that you'll find some of these fish, but I don't steer away from mud or sand. I find them in both those things. The biggest piece is when the river rises, are the fish comfortable where they are? Can they stay there without burning energy to get to the next, you know, refuge area? So the best areas tend to be the ones where no matter what the river does, they can just tuck up to the bank or tuck up into behind an island or tuck someplace and stay safe. And then as it drops, which I believe is the hardest time to catch fish, the rise is the easiest. But when it starts to drop, then you got to figure out, you know, how far out into the current seam or how far out behind this structure are the active fish going to be? Because you could be on fish, but if they're not active in the wintertime, you're not going to catch them.
Gotcha. Okay. And just thinking about what you're saying there, like some of the places that you're talking about, like behind ledges and stuff, is where I find a lot of fish in the summertime. So what differentiates that from the winter to the summer? Or is it basically whether they can hang out there if the
it doesn't mean that your winter hole doesn't necessarily hold fish during the summer. It just means that there's something else about that hole that keeps them there. So
gotcha.
You know, they're there for, you know, 3 main reasons. One is, you know, they're there for comfort. You know, they want to be safe. They don't want to be, you know, they don't want to be endangered by other fish. They don't want to be endangered by flow. They don't want to be, you know, constantly bombarded by sticks and stuff floating by. So, you know, the turbidity of the water. They're there for forage. You know, that there's a good a good group of forage. In the wintertime, there are some crayfish, there are some insects, but most of the forage in the wintertime is usually, some form of a minnow, right? Fry of some sort or minnow. Fry is probably the wrong word to use for the wintertime, but they're eating a lot of minnows. So you've got to be kind of well-rounded and realize that the minnows, most of the minnows in our river systems like colder water than the bass do. So they'll move in pods all over the river, where the smallmouth kind of stay in a smaller group, smaller grouping of area, during the winter. So the best spots, you could find 10 spots that look good and they only fish behind 2 of them. And there's something unique about that spot. And that's really where the anglers come in. And paddlers have an advantage they don't really realize, is that when you're floating on the water, you're feeling the eddies. You eddied in, eddied out of things. You feel how the water pushes you up against the rocks, how you can be down below a structure that's visible to you by 50, 60 yards, and all of a sudden the boat just eddies out into this invisible eddy. And that's a great find, right? When you find that situation, you realize, okay, I'm in a secondary eddy way below what is I can see with my eyes from a structure standpoint, but it's like a pond in the middle of the river, and those areas are the absolute best because most people don't find those spots. So it's you find that like when I had my kids were younger and they would want to swim during the summertime. We had a rule: you could swim, but if you found a cold spot in the river, you had to tell Pat, tell your dad when you're swimming, you had to tell me where they were, because I'd make a mental note. Okay, there's a spring there, and so that cold water in the summer is warm water in the winter. So sometimes you'll see ice form, but there's always a spot off that bank that doesn't have the ice. So you've got the slack water, but why is that area down in that? Why is that always the first part to lose its ice? So the first part to gain it, first part to lose it is kind of one of those games you play looking for different spots.
Gotcha.
A kayaker will learn sometimes quicker than you will in a big boat, just by feeling how the boat's responding. They're lighter. They're more in tune with what the river's doing. You're not fighting it. You're using it for yourself. And I think that's some of the advantages that people have when you're in a paddlecraft.
I didn't really think of that, but that makes a lot of sense. And that, just thinking off the top of my head, I know of quite a few different places where, exactly what you're describing happens. You'll be coming down the current seam, and then all of a sudden, the boat will just catch, and then you'll kind of spin a little bit, and boom, you're just sitting there and not having
you have the flow on the surface, which definitely dictates some of the stuff that goes underneath. And then of course you have the flow that you don't feel unless you're a diver or something like that. But, you have those laminate flows where, you'll have spots that are very particular where the fish are going to hang and not have to burn a lot of energy. Some of the best videos you have, these trout guys that have these underwater footage where you see the trout in current, not having any current at all. And all it takes is like a turn of the fin or a little movement of the tail, and they'll slide from one soft spot to the next soft spot in seemingly, current filled water. So it's not so crazy that bass would do the same thing. And walleye are also, this is a great time of year to catch walleye, pike, and muskie as well. So,
and it's interesting that talking about that too. And, in those videos with the trout and stuff, sometimes that spot can be so small that it, holds just one fish, but as long as they kind of chill out.
In the winter, we're looking for holes that hold multiple fish, right? So that is one of the things, right? But, generally the biggest, we used to throw, everybody wants to throw behind a rock. In the summertime and in the springtime, we'd like to throw in front of the rock or alongside the rock, figuring that the biggest, most aggressive fish at that moment is going to be in the key location. So it's not going to wait for the bait to come flinging around it. It's going to try to meet it where it possibly can. So, a lot of guys will come in and they'll want to fish just behind the rock, but a lot of times those fish are in front of you. I'm sure you've caught that in the summer or spring, not so much in the wintertime, but all other times of the year. Likewise, everybody wants to throw directly behind a structure. They'll throw it where that key dead water is. And a lot of times you'll find fish, but we'll come back over that spot when someone else has already fished it, because I'll know that 75 yards below where they were, or maybe where their boat it was sitting, is really where the fish are, right? Oh my gosh, they're sitting right on top of the fish and they don't even realize it. So you'll come back a half hour later, even though a boat or two has fished it, earlier in the day, and you'll just load up on them. And it's just one of those things where sometimes you get a bird's nest in your line and you're messing with your line and your jerkbait's just sitting out in no man's land. You get struck and you go, wait a minute. that isn't even where I was targeting. How did I get hit out there? So, and there's times you can see it. You can see if the wind's not blowing, you can see the bubble lines doing something different and creating this invisible pool, if you will, that's not really around structure, but is created by that structure as it tapers back up or does something different from the high water to the low water that really can pay off with some of these less known areas.
No, and that makes a lot of sense too. That was one of the things I kind of learned from watching some of Jeff Little's videos. He talks about when you're coming up on a structure like boulders that are out of the water, to not just go right up and fish right behind the boulders, but to start well behind it, work the bottom end of that pool, and then where the current kind of tails out at the bottom, and then
Exactly.
work your way, and kind of right behind the rocks is almost the last place you want to fish,
Yeah,
because
I mean, it's obvious, and there are fish there, and sometimes there's a bunch of fish there, especially the higher the water. But as that water breaks, they start to move. They're going looking for forage. They're going to drop back or drop over or slide, and it's just being able to find those fish. The next thing is that you could be fishing on top of fish, but using the wrong bait, or not presenting it well because you didn't like the color. And it's one of those things where I myself get hooked on a color of a bait, and it'll take a lot to get me out. And I'll notice I'll switch to a color going, this is a great color for this, this crawfish color. And I'll throw it 6 or 7 times and not get a strike and go right back to my favorite color. And I wonder myself, am I fishing this favorite color better than I was fishing the color I didn't have the confidence in? And so Jeff and I used to, joke around, and that I think he still has confidence baits, but we used to say, well, Chris, what's your favorite color? It's confidence. If I have confidence in something, I'm going to fish it better, whether it's a profile or a color or a lip structure on a crankbait or the way that it wobbles. Catching gives you confidence. And once you have confidence in something, it's difficult to deviate too far from that when you're catching and being successful, right? So I don't like to argue with fish. I don't speak their language very well, but once what I'm doing is not working, I stop digging and go to something different, right?
Okay. And that brings me into kind of, another avenue I wanted to talk about, and that was kind of baits and the things that you have confidence in. Like the bait that I've come to kind of rely on in the wintertime, because it's kind of the only thing that has worked for me with any occurrence, was a blade bait. And, that's just, cast, let it hit the bottom, and then just pull up until you feel it vibrate and let it die, and pull up until and that's about the only thing, that I have found that works with
right. And that's probably my number 3, right? For me, that's probably my number 3. And mostly because my river has changed, right? So I've always fished the Susquehanna, fished since I was a kid. But I never got out here much in the wintertime because my home, you're going to drive, you might have bad weather. It might be a day where it's just not working. So you want to be able to come home. So why travel the extra distance if you don't have to? So the blade bait, which does work on the Susquehanna, really works well on the Delaware because I have a lot more areas that are deeper. Like I like to work my blade baits in 6 to 12 foot of water, when I'm on the river, and there's just not a lot of those spots, especially post flatheads, that you can pick on the smallmouth, and catch them in numbers in those areas. So there are a few spots that are still fishing very well with the blades, but I would say, honestly, the blade is probably my number 3. It's still high on my list, but it's probably my number 3. And I throw heavy. I rarely throw anything less than a half, and I will throw 3/4 if I need to. And I do the same thing you do. I try not to give it a big lift. I try to just, I'm very, very subtle lift, or I'm using the bait caster reel, a high-speed reel, and I'll spin it once and let it stop. And then, that'll bring it off the bottom and then let it fall. And so you want to feel the wiggle, but you notice that when you let it fall, you start to lose feel on the bait, right? And then once you start it back up, you feel the vibration. So it's weight, vibration, weight, vibration. If it hits bottom, you feel the clunk, right? So I tell people that when you're fishing, especially clients, is when you stop feeling this, like, you lift, bottom, lift, bottom, lift, bottom, and that's a faster view of what's actually happening. But, you want to feel this on the lift, you want to feel it shaking. And then as it's going to the bottom, you want to feel that strike the bottom. And if you don't feel it strike the bottom, reel up as fast as you can, because something causes bait not to hit bottom, and it's usually stuck in the fish's mouth. So a lot of times you don't feel the strike until you go to lift again, and that's when that fish is on, and that's the time. And why that works, I have no idea. Why they hit this vibrating bait like they do in the cold water, it blows my mind, but it works. You have to be willing to lose a few, though.
I was going to say that is one of the things that I've learned with that, and another thing too one of the reasons why I'm kind of looking for an alternative bait is because the winter hole that I know of has a lot of vegetation, so I am constantly losing my vibration from it getting a leaf or and so I spend a lot of time cleaning off those treble hooks,
Right.
and I'm sure that I'm wasting casts doing that.
Well, this year it was really tough early on in the late fall, early winter, because this year the river was very low and we had a ton of grass vegetation. I'm sure you guys were inundated with it as well. I mean, usually it's a problem from like the Juniata down for a few miles, and you can go someplace else and not have to deal with it for a couple of weeks, and then you can come back to those other spots, or you can fish the east side versus the west, and it's not really as bad. This year it was everywhere, and some places it was horrible. So throwing anything that touched the bottom for even a few seconds was tough. And then, of course, as the cold weather comes, you get the die off, and then it starts to float subsurface, and that's just terrible. But you do have to just know that you're going to get 1 or 2 good casts out of every 10 you make, and you're going to have to live with it, because that's just, you got to fish, right? But
right.
So my number 2 bait this time of year would be a jerkbait, a suspended jerkbait. I mean, that's I love the suspended jerkbait bite. It's a simple bite. It's very easy to teach. The hardest part about the jerkbait bite is finding the right size and the right color when the fish are really picky. But it's one of those baits where I tell people, I want you to throw it 10 times. We're going to throw it 10 times, which was going to be about, 10 times is probably close to 15 or 20 minutes for me, the way I fish it in the wintertime. And you got to be patient. And I try to take their mind off of what they're doing, so they're not moving it too much. Whether you're throwing, I throw a lot of different profiles. So I throw some big ones and some small ones, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but I throw a lot of different profiles. I don't throw a lot of different colors. I probably have 30 colors, but I have 4 or 5 of my wintertime favorites, and I don't deviate from them too much. I mean, there's some that are very bold. One of the best colors through the years, and it's no secret, was something called Hot Steel. That was a great color. It had, it was blue and orange and kind of like a yellowish color to it, like almost and it just was an ugly, god awful color, but the bass really liked it. And then when the water's clear, I go to something that I can almost see through. It's not clear, but it might be a pearl AU or a chartreuse shad or something that, I can see through. I love those ones that are like brown on the top, but clear through the side, kind of the dace looking things that just, but
have like some kind of ghost pattern to them.
Almost. A ghost pattern is perfect, right? I mean, yes, a ghost minnow is a great color. And whether you're throwing greenback ghost or brown ghost or, AU ghost, whatever you're throwing on those clear water days, and how clear our river gets, it's really a plus. The thing that people don't get or don't realize is the pause is important. Whether you go 5 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 15. I fished with Jeff one day and the pause was ridiculously low. I couldn't even bring myself to do it. I swear it was 2 minutes long and it felt like an eternity. And, I had caught some real good fish before Jeff that day, and he's always kicking my butt when it comes to big fish. And I thought I had him, and he had this god awful 100 and it might've been a 115 or a 120 size jerk bait, and it was cold. It was late December. It was brutally cold. It was windy. You couldn't feel your line. And I thought, I got Jeff today, because I've already got a 20 in my kayak, and I got him today. And it was getting late. He loves that late shift in the day, and I don't really care too much for it at the time. And sure enough, I'm where I can see the takeout. I finally got him where I want Jeff Little. And doesn't he roll into a 20 and a half or 21 on this crazy big jerk bait, just god awful. I'm throwing like a 78 or a 97 MR, and he's got this bulky, ugly, and it just ugly worked. I mean, he's just right at the end of the rate. He just had so much confidence that even though he wasn't catching on it earlier, he just had the confidence, and it paid off. I think he caught that fish, and I thought we were over. And I think he caught another one, 10 minutes later on. It's like, oh, I give up. But confidence is so important to some of these baits. The other thing is getting the bait down to the right level. And you can do that a number of ways, right? You can throw a bait that you can put suspended dots on it. You can throw a bait with a deeper lip on it, a +1 lip. You can throw, you just got to know how close you are to the bottom. And I like to be pretty close to the bottom when I'm fishing, especially in the winter. The fish don't usually, on me, they don't usually rise very far to hit the bait. So I need to be, within 12, maybe 18 inches at the most from the bottom. And if I can be on the bottom and not get hooked up, that's even better. But, I've been on the river sometimes where fluorocarbon was needed. I've been on a river where, throwing just mono worked out great. I fished with a guy once at a time, and he was throwing mono, like a 6-foot fluorocarbon leader on superline. And I never use superline for these hard baits. I just never do it. I don't like the shock value. I feel like I'm moving the bait too much with it. But I had to literally take one of my rods and convert it while we were on the water because they wanted that 6-foot leader with that line to get the bait down where it needed to be. I didn't have any +1s with me, and I didn't have any suspended dots that I felt like confident enough to dial in at the time. And it was just that line combination. But I would say majority of the time, I'm either throwing all fluoro on that setup or all mono. And I've learned I need to keep an extra reel tucked in my bag that has the super line with the mono, with the fluorocarbon.
Gotcha.
So that is very important.
And then, so general retrieve for the jerkbait is a couple of cranks to get it down to depth, and then that's where, and then your.
So I don't even crank it. So what I do is I'll throw it out. I like to throw it out, at about 30 to 45 degrees downriver. So it'll be slack line for a water because the river is different than fishing on a lake. Be slack line for a water and for a little bit, and then as it swings behind that boat, is doing that swing, I'll just use the rod tip, and I'll either, if I'm in shallow water, I'll move my jerkmans where the rod tip's going up. And if it's deeper water, I'll make sure my rod tip's going down. And if I'm not really sure how close I am to the bottom, it might even be a sideways toss just to kind of give the bait. But sometimes it's just a little double pause, and sometimes I'm ripping it hard, right? So it's the warmer the weather, generally the harder the rips are, and the more I'm moving it. There are times when I'll reel and stop and jerk, and sometimes where I'll just leave that bait sweep. And if I catch fish, on that sweep at 30 degrees, I'll just cut my 45 to, 40. And if I start catching them on the 25 or catch them directly behind the boat, a lot of times I'll just throw out 15 degrees. And so that just takes away from it. Or you'll notice that you're hitting something, you could be hitting a ledge, the backside of a ledge on a long cast. Well, I'll make a shorter cast so I can be right in front of that ledge or where those bass are sitting. But you're paying attention. What was I doing on that time? Was it a long pause? So, in my head, I'm going 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And when I'm fishing with clients, I'm not fishing. I'm counting for them in my head and trying to get them, hey, would you like a cup of coffee? Did you watch that ball game last night? Oh, how terrible did the team play? And then, they'll go to move the bait, or they'll look at talk to me, and all of a sudden the rod will load up, and that's a little light bulb moment that goes, oh, I wasn't moving it much, or I just got done twitching it and got hammered. And that's the kind of things that once you get that light bulb moment with people, the jerkbait becomes one of their favorite baits. But it's a must have.
No, and that's interesting.
It's one of those baits where a jerkbait, some days a jerkbait is what they want, and you can throw tubes and other soft plastics, and I don't care what your favorites are, and just not catch them, but you throw a jerkbait and get it. So you got to have it, and you got to get comfortable with it. So, you might as well just grin and bear it and get used to it. Now you can fish if you got a big structure like an island, tip, or you've got a submerged grass bed or a ledge that breaks where there's fast water on either side. You can fish that in total slack water like you would on a lake. That takes a bit more skill set, in my opinion, and a lot more patience, because your bait, you have to trust that your bait's doing what it's supposed to do while it's sitting out there in dead water. Because with a current, the bait's wobbling, is doing things, and fish are coming up and looking at it, and sometimes they'll bump it and even hit it where you go, how in the world did it hit that bait and not get the hooks? A lot of times when that happens, they're not hitting the bait where the body is, they're hitting the bait where the nose is, because the smallmouth, really, if it's going to kill something, it's more like a dolphin, where it'll hit it first and stun it and then come back and get it. I noticed from fly fishing that just by watching it, a lot of those bass will hit the front of the bait, more than they'll hit the back of the bait. Now, if they're really sluggish, they will sneak up on it like a walleye and hit it from the back. But a lot of times when the bass hit the bait, they hit it, more towards the top or the head of the bait. And that's sometimes when you get wrapped and go, how in the world? I can't even reach in my tackle bag and pull one of these things out of a protected box without getting the hooks into my glove. How is this fish smashed it that hard and not be on there? So, that's
and interesting. So I'm thinking too of different water depths too. So if you're in, deeper than 12, are you more blade bait or some bottom bait? And
then, if I'm in 12 foot, I just don't have the confidence that nothing I have, even my +2s for the MegaBass, they're going to come up for that. That's just me. I don't have confidence in it. I like to be in less than 7 foot of water if I can. And I'll fish it all the way down to 3.5, 4 foot. And I'll just base my choice because I have multiple colors and 4 or 5. I have jackals. I have Lucky Craft. I have the old Excaliburs that I really like. I have my MegaBass, which is now my current favorite. But, and Shimano makes a new one out now that everybody seems to be, gaga over. But it's just finding that bait that has the size, the color, and the wobble they want, and then executing your time for them. But if I'm in 7 or 8 foot of water or 9, I'll put a +1 or a +2 on. I would prefer a +1 and a suspended knot than a +2 because that long lip just creeps me out a little bit. It makes me feel like it's not working the way I need to. And you'll be surprised some days how much current these fish are willing to be in, or how far down from the initial visual structure they are. I mean, I have a few holes where I'll catch them right up to the rocks or right up to the structure, and then I'll catch them again at like 75, 80 yards down, not feet, the yards. I mean, that's a long distance. And, other areas, it's just sweeping too fast, but you can kind of feel this stuff once you're out there a while. You'll feel, what's working, what doesn't work. Gotcha. And then, of course, my favorite, I used to be a hair jig guy. I love hair jig, but my favorite is some sort of a soft plastic. And I really like these Chillee Willies. Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of baits that work as well as this thing does. I think the main deal with this is, you got to. The main deal is that tail is just so soft. It either wiggles when it's not supposed to, or wiggles more when other ones don't wiggle at all. I have no idea what turns them on to it, but over the last 5 years, it's been kind of my absolute. If it's at the end of the day and I want to be sexy and I want to fish blade baits or jerk baits and I can't get them, I'm putting on one of these for the last hour and I'm going to force myself to catch 2 or 3 fish just so I don't get skunked, right? And my clients have, they love to throw their favorite, Ned rig, and I'm not saying they don't work. We've had great days with the TRD bugs, great days with the hogs, great days with just the hula stick or the tickler or, some kind of a Ned bomb or anything that works. But I mean, this thing has I've had guys that just said, I'm not throwing it. It looks stupid. I said, okay, don't throw it. And then their buddies who are out and they say, do you want to throw one? And he goes, yeah, I'll throw it. And after the 3rd, 4th fish, the guy goes, hey, tie one of those on for me, right? I keep those on. We just had an experience like this the other day that I was fishing with a buddy and his father, and he was getting bumped, but he just wasn't getting anything to commit. And some time had gone by, and I said, hey, do you mind if I give you a Chillee Willee and tie it on for you? And I bet within 20 minutes he had 2 fish in the boat on the Chillee Willee. So it was one of those things where it's not that they don't like tubes. I think they see a lot of them. And it's not that they don't like the TRDs and the Ned rigs, because they do, because I throw this on a Ned rig. But it's just, I don't know what it is about this bait, but it's soft enough and it must move just enough. But I mean, when I was with my buddy Floyd, I had fish on and I did not feel them. I saw the line move and set the hook. And that happened to me 2 or 3 times where I'm trying to keep, the wind was really bad that day. But the fish were either dumb enough or they liked this thing enough that they were holding on to it for 4 or 5 seconds to give, this dummy a chance to realize, as the wind's pushing my line and I can't feel, hey, something's happening, it's not right. And I'd reel down and set the hook, and sure enough, the fish was on there long enough to keep it. So it's just one of those baits that seems to work.
And having heard you mention them quite a few times on your posts and videos and stuff, that I picked them up, but I don't know if, some of the places that I fish, the hole that I fish regularly, is deeper. It's 15, even 18 at spots. And I I don't know. Are you generally working it the same way? Like I would work a Ned rig where I cast it out, let it sink to the bottom, and then just slowly drag it, kind of counting rocks.
Yeah. So I have a video, but I can't really show you right now. So it depends. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll throw it into the heart of the opposite seam that I'm on, right? So usually when I set my boat up, I'm anchored or I'm spot locked or I've got my talons down. In the wintertime, boat control is so critical. You don't want that boat moving because, you know, you have to move that bait and know where it is at all times. And I'll say this, I don't want you moving it a foot at a time. This is not springtime. I want you to drag it versus hop it. But there'll be a time when you'll be doing this with your line. But I'm not reeling. I'm allowing the current that's on that edge to sweep that bait down and kind of do something with it, right? So, and I want to feel, okay, well, I went over that rock and I got hit. I want to find that rock again. So when I go over it, I know that my strike's going to be in the next 4 or 5 touches with it. So some days I'm doing this with it. I'm not reeling. I'm not picking up any line at all. I'm just letting it, casting downriver, quartering downriver, just like I would with a jerkbait. And I'm just holding my rod tip, at a decent angle high, but I want to feel it. I want to feel it go down through it. And other times I'll just leave it sit there and let the current do everything it needs to do. Because sometimes they need to come up on it and look at it and then eat it. Because you'll watch, sometimes you'll leave it sit completely still. I'll reach over for a cup of coffee and all of a sudden I get slammed and it's like, wow, what just happened? I wasn't even moving that bait. And other times where I'll start to reel it in and so I'm dragging it and the fish comes, halfway through my second turn of the handle and smashes it. So you kind of let the fish tell you what they want, but a drag this time of year is probably better than a hop, because a lot of times they don't want to chase, but they do, they feel it's getting away. They're going to eat it. But that too much moving is goes, you know what? My food doesn't usually move like this. And it might require me to burn more calories than I want to. So I'm not moving with it either. Right. So I would say a lot of times the colder the water is, the slower I have to go with it. And a drag is easier to feel how much you're moving it. Like I tell people in the winter, do not move your soft plastic with the reel. Move your soft plastic with the rod tip, right? So you don't want to, it's not even if I'm throwing a swim bait, I mean, I'm crawling that thing with barely moving the handle. A lot of these reels today, especially the high speed stuff, is moving that bait 36 inches every time you make a revolution. So you think you've only moved it a little bit, but you've moved it out of the strike zone. And the colder the water, the smaller the strike zone is. So if you hit that, you talked about your vegetation, sometimes I remember going through what felt like a pine tree down there. It's like, they shake it loose. And as soon as it would go loose, it would hit bottom. And on the next lift or the next drag portion, I would get clocked. And I think I got 6 or 7 fish in a row. And I would tell people, you just got to find whatever that is down there, that brush down there. And, occasionally you'll lose a jig on it. But if you could hit that brush pile and get it over, or hit that ledge that's so snaggy and then get it over it, a lot of times you know exactly where the bait is. The fish are right below that ledge and they whack it. It could be a rock. It could be a log. I hate the logs because they eat my hooks up pretty well. But, you just gotta hit it.
Now, and are you going heavier with that or lighter? Or I know.
I'll tell you this much: I throw it as literally as light as you can go. I fish a little lighter than most people, and they all tell me that I'm fishing too light. But I'll fish super light until because I can get it through spots, even though it takes me longer. But it forces me to fish slow. I can get it through spots that I want. Now, if I throw it out there and it gets swept downriver really quick, I gotta go. But I'm not opposed to throwing a 16th or a 3/32 or 1/10. Probably my favorite weight is an 1/8 or a 6th, in deep water. But I've thrown 3/16. I'll throw a quarter if I need to, if the wind's dictating it. What I don't want fish to do is when they pick it up, I don't want them to feel the weight of the head, right? So I want them to be able to just, with as little effort as possible, open their mouth and suck it in, right? Because they're really not hitting it. Usually what you're feeling is them sucking in it. Largemouth videos show this, right? The bait's way away from their mouth. They open it, create a vacuum, and just suck the thing in. You're hitting it. You're feeling it hit their lips or the back of their throat, and that's what makes it set the hook. Or you're feeling it trying to spit it out because they felt something's not quite right. But I'll throw as light as I possibly can so that I can work it slower. But if you're in 12 foot of water, you're not going to be throwing 16th unless you're really, really good and you've got no wind, which is rare in the winter. You got to fish through some wind. When people ask me where I'm going to launch from, like, a week before the trip, I don't know. It depends on what the wind's doing that day. If I'm going to pick the spots based on level and wind to let me decide where I am. And if it's going to be raining and we're going to fish the rain, I'd really not rather run 10 miles to my first spot, right? Or super cold in the morning. So I'll pick a lot of different spots where the fishing's close to the ramp so we can get a few fish in the boat. And as the day warms up, we can go and do a little bit more traversing. Same thing with a kayak, right? I don't want to launch someplace in my first good spots 4 miles downriver, right? If I can, I'd rather just launch. Or if I know my favorite spot's going to be out of the wind, I'm gonna do that, and I'll put up with a Jeff Little paddle. Jeff likes to paddle sometimes. Now he's got the power behind him with that new motor, right? But it's just one of these things where, I remember fishing with him sometimes. We would paddle for an hour before we got to the spot. It's like, dude, I'm not as young as you are, or as strong as you are. You're killing me. But I'll pick the spot that I can get to the holes that my number 1, 2, 3, 4 holes before I have to start to break down new water, right? So I go to my confidence levels. Once I catch a few fish, if I'm confident there's plenty of fish there and the guys are acting cold, I'll try not to move too far. But if they're willing to take a run, I'm not opposed to going 6-7 miles on a cool day.
Gotcha. And one of the things that you mentioned was one thing that we hadn't covered until that point, and that was that you usually try to anchor, or you're not moving and letting the current move around you. That's a big thing.
It is a big thing. And so a lot of jet boat guys, a lot of bass guys, they want to use their trolling motor every place they go. And I get it. But I've actually sat on holes and I'll look down and I'm creating mud with my trolling motor, or I can hear the sand hitting hitting the boat as you're spinning. I'm going, if I'm trying to fish these fish below the boat or off to the side of the boat, and I'm creating, an uncomfortable situation for them, whether it's debris or sand or something like that, I'll throw an anchor out. I'm not opposed, and I've whether Jeff used to not like kayaks with anchors, but I think he's changed his viewpoint, because there's just sometimes when you want to anchor up so that you're just not. I'm not talking about anchor up in strong current, right? I'm not talking about anchor up in high water where your boat's in the current and logs are going to climb. Be smart about it. But if your boat can be as motionless as possible, whether you're using a sticket or an anchor or some kind of a talon type anchor pin, or you're using your spot lock, or using your leg over a rock, or you're using your paddle to kind of stick you down, or stick it pin or something like along those lines, something to keep you where the only thing that's going to pull your line is you or a fish. So if the boat's pulling your line when it's really cold, I think it's a problem. I think some guys who have great feel can do it, but if you're not anchoring, or you're not spot locking, or you're not doing something to control the boat so that your clients can fish, I think you're missing a few fish, and they're missing fish. So you and I could probably do it because we're on the water, good Lord, 250 days a year. But the person that, it's their first time fishing, you want to put everything in their favor, and you want to make sure that boat control is as good as possible. And, wind can push you in. So sometimes you pick a different side, even though it's not your favorite side to fish this hole from, but the wind is allowing you to do it. You know how the wind can sometimes set the kayak up in a certain position that makes it perfect. Mm-hmm. And the last thing you want to do is swing through an active hole, right? You don't want the craft to go through an active hole. You don't want to make noise if you can avoid it. And I don't want to create a plume of mud or sand if I can avoid it. So if the fish are real shallow and I'm not really sure where they are, I'd rather throw an anchor a few times and slip the rope down, or spot it down, or hit my talon. The only problem with talons or any kind of those rods, they may not make noise when they hit, right? So I usually try to throw an anchor out. The wind's bad, I'll put the talon down to stop the boat from sliding or moving, because if the wind's gusting and the boat and the tail of the boat's moving, it's walking. That you don't want that either. So I just try to keep the boat this time of year really, really, really still. I mean, painfully still.
And you talked about Jeff not liking anchors, but I think you're right. I think his tune has changed, because I know one of the videos I watched, he actually talks about using 2 anchors so that the front of the boat and the back of the boat are positioned.
He was funny because years ago, and I'm talking a long time ago, and Jeff is a very powerful person. He's a great runner. He's got great stamina, and he could just sit there and hold the kayak still where most people couldn't. And he used to say that, never throw an anchor out. And if you do, tie the other end to a certain part of a male anatomy so that, you would know you weren't in strong enough current to do it. And, we used to chuckle about it, but, he was, I'll call it a purist. I like to tease him about it, but, there was a time when it was manpower, paddle only, no, you could use a stick it pin, but, you had to be, when you did that, you wanted to make sure you were in, more of the slack water. He would throw a leg over something or set the kayak up, and he just felt the kayak was an extension of his body. But not everybody can do that stuff, especially all day long like he could. So, I was always a big fan of making my own little anchors and, just small things that wouldn't hold in strong current. But if I needed help eddying out or being close to where the fish was and keep the boat where I wanted it to, the combination of an anchor of some sort and an anchor pin was usually my game. I mean, it just was. They're not always safe. You can get a lot of trouble with it, but if you're smart about it and, you're dressed properly and you're with a group of people when it's cold out. I mean, I never fish by myself when it's cold. If I fish by myself when it's cold, I usually bank fish, and I hate to bank fish, so don't do it very often.
I'm the same. And I was telling you before the show, I just got my dry suit back. I had the neck replaced because it was way too tight and it was like choking me out. I felt like I could feel my heartbeat in my neck, and it almost was bad because I would be like, it's warm enough that I don't need it, and it would cause me not to wear it because of that. But now I'll give a shout out to that company on a later show because they were great to work with too. But I got my dry suit back. The neck is amazing now, and I feel like it's going to be no problem to wear it. So I'm super psyched about that. But that's one thing definitely with this time of year is you do want to be safe. I know the first time I started using an anchor, one of the very first things I bought was a knife to attach right to my PFD, so that
Absolutely,
in the event of an emergency, or even if it gets sketchy, you can just boom, cut the line. And
I use an anchor cleat that has no catch or no tie. I don't tie it. It's an anchor cleat that just is a jam cleat, and I buy them, and they're made by a company that makes them for drift boats. So if I get in trouble, up it goes, and the other end of it has a little floaty on it, so I know I can come back and catch it with a hook or something like that later and try to salvage my line and my anchor. But if a tree's coming or something like that, I can't get the anchor up in time. I don't like anything big riding up my line. I don't care how big your boat is. I don't want anything riding up my line. Not even a few sticks are fine, but if it's bigger than that big around, and especially none of these logs, I don't like to set up. And so a lot of guys will go, oh, we can catch them right now. And the river's at peak. It's at I'll say 10 foot of Harrisburg, which is really close to the action stage, or at least the caution stage. But you got to be careful. If there's stuff coming down river and you're going to set up on that, you're not going to be inside. You're going to be outside fishing in. It can get dangerous if you don't have an eye constantly on it, which makes using the trolling motor on a spot lock a little better. But again, it's just, you just got to be smart with when you use it and what you're using. And there's no real wrong answer. Just, I don't want to be thrown to the river. I've seen enough people over my time of fishing in cold water try to climb back in a boat, and they think they can do it. But even with a ladder and even with somebody on the boat, if you're in deeper water than you can reach bottom on, you've got seconds to get back in that boat before you lose your energy. You're not going to die, but you're going to lose your energy, and you're going to have to hang on to that boat or that structure until you can get someplace safe and get in the boat. So, air temp can be brutal when the river temperature. The river doesn't have to be 36 degrees for you to have a problem in. That air temperature blowing, 15, 20 miles per hour on a cold morning, and even if the river's 39, 40 degrees, you're going to lose energy fast. And I don't think people realize how fast your muscle will send fluid someplace else to protect your heart and protect your core, and let your legs be almost useless, or your arms. It happens, and it happens so fast. So, yeah. So one of the things we all have, I like my fishing clothes, and I started, I won't say branding, but instead of like throwing somebody else's stuff on that I'm paying $80 for, why not just get my own stuff? And so over the last 2 years, I really learned a lot about fabric and how tight the fabric is, or how loose the fabric is, what its sun protection is, what its warmth percentage is. And so I'm a big hoodie fan. I'm a big stay away from cotton. I mean, if you've got cotton in anything you're wearing this time of year, get rid of it. I don't care if it's a pair of gloves. If it's got cotton in it, it does not belong on your body if you're on the water, especially in the rain. Don't do it. I don't care how good your jackets are. I mean, we were using Simms gear, which I honestly believe is some of the best stuff I've ever put on. I mean, I've had jackets that were given to me that I stopped wearing because they just didn't work, or I had to send them back because they just weren't keeping me dry. And they were high-end, real good name stuff that I paid a lot of money for, or stuff that was given to me by the company to promote. And I just had to call them and say, listen, I can't promote this. It doesn't work where I am. I can't stay dry in it, and it's just not working. But I've been really lucky with the Simms stuff for the last 5 years. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of good stuff out there, but I've tried so much stuff that works for a year or so and then starts to seep or be subject to water leakage, and it's just not for me. But again, I like these synthetic material, these synthetic wools, some of the wools, and setting yourself up with a base layer and then a thermal layer and then a hard shell, and we all know we all have our favorite hard shells, but just something outer to block the wind, to keep your body temperature in, but not so much that when you overheat, it doesn't let it go. So just learning a lot about that when picking. But I have a lot of stuff that people say, well, you sell those shirts. It's like, it's not really my mode, but if I order them next time, I'll order a couple if you really want them. But I've removed all cotton from I mean, honestly, all cotton from everything. I don't wear any cotton socks. I don't wear any cotton underwear. Everything I wear is high synthetic and stuff that's going to breathe or hold heat in based on where it is on my body. So right down, nothing cotton.
I know when I took my my paddling class and they talked about cold water paddling, the term was cotton kills. Cotton if you remember that. Yep. Yeah. So,
and it does. I mean, it's comfortable material. It's very comfortable. It breathes. It's very comfortable, but it has some attributes that are absolutely horrible. It collects moisture. It doesn't want to dry, right? And it's just not. I mean, somewhere where you can get away with it a little bit. I mean, it's not going to kill you by any means, and it will keep you cool. It's very comfortable. But I mean, if you have some of these, polyester materials, these sun shirts, you could just splash yourself with your bottled water or just dip your hand in the water, and all of a sudden you're cooling down. And it's just understanding how the thread count, what the weight of it is, and how to manage it and keep the sun off you. In the summertime, and keep the heat inside you when it's wintertime is a big plus. And not everything's created equally, so it's good to have something that works.
Cool. All right, well, we're closing in on an hour here, so any other tips you can think of, or things you see customers doing regularly in the cold that is something common, or
sure.
just
I'll bring up two things. The first thing is and this is just something that makes sense. Focus, right? So if you're hungry, grab something to eat. If you're thirsty, drink something. If you're cold, go change your gloves out, go get warm, whatever you have to do on the boat. Because if you're not focused into what's going on, you're going to miss a few of your fish. And the other thing is, along those lines is you want to be focused, because on a winter day, you may get a dozen opportunities. And if you fish clean, you'll land a dozen fish, which is hard to do some days. But if you're not focused, or if you're going to miss those fish either on a hook set, or being late, or being out of position, having your rod too high. You just don't want to be focused on anything else when you're out there. If you can, just, focus on what you're doing, as long as it's not, there's sometimes when I try to distract people on a jerkbait bite, but I don't want them to be thinking, I really want a cup of coffee. I really want a cup of coffee. Well, you just move that bait way too far. Or, they cast out, make the perfect cast. And long before that bait even hit the bottom, they're reeling 2 times. It's like, well, you just made the perfect cast. You just moved that thing 6 foot off the bank just by moving it twice. It's like, stop. Because they're thinking about, or I'll say to them, where'd you catch that fish? I don't know. It's like, what do you mean you don't know? You where did you cast to? What was your casting point? I don't know. I said, so see that tree right there? Cast to that tree. And if you just watch where your line is, if you're hitting it, then I want you to cast to that tree again, because they're usually not alone. They're usually not by themselves. So, that ability to focus, if you've got stuff going on at work, I'm not saying that fishing isn't a great thing, but wintertime is really a time to go out and really be able to focus. It's not that it's not good medicine for you to be out in the water, but sometimes that's not the time that you can lose your concentration. And then The other thing is I recommend fishing with as many people as you possibly can. And you're going to learn something sometimes by the person who may not be the most skilled person in the boat, someone who's willing to do something different, and pay attention to what they're doing. But by fishing with different people, you don't get caught up in, I have a friend of mine that throws spinner baits when it's a lot colder than I would even consider throwing spinner baits. And another friend who throws crankbaits when my temperature for crankbaits is like 45 degrees and up. I'm not throwing a crankbait at 40 degrees or 38 degrees, and here he is catching fish on a crankbait. So it's not my cup of tea, and I'm not very good at it, but it opens up another way to catch these fish and understand, hey, they're in a lot more chase mode than I would have expected them to be in. So by going out with different people, you'll see some styles and some things that you'll just learn by fishing that, you can learn alone, but it's just nice to have a different extra stick in the water, especially in the winter, so that you can kind of, you've got 4 kayaks out. It's good to have numbers in the cold weather. And this guy's going to throw this, and you touch base with you catching? Yeah, I just got 2 on this bait. It's like, what is that thing? That's the ugliest bait I've ever seen in my life, but it's catching fish. So what about that bait's working? And then just being able to share information is really kind of one of the things to do this time of year. I mean, let's face it, anybody can catch fish in the spring. And if you're not catching fish in the spring and the summer and the fall, you pick up golf or something like that, because that's one of the easiest times in the world to catch it. If you really want to be a successful winter angler, you're going to have to open up your eyes to different things. And it's all about the learning. And there is no true skunk in the wintertime. If you're going to go out when the weather is 28 degrees in the morning and deal with frozen islets and fish for these fish, you got to realize that there's going to be days where you're not going to struggle. And I have a little meme where there's a guy and he's got a butt on a plate, like, it literally got my rear end handed to me. And you'll see him a couple times a year. I mean, I don't like it hurts my pride. And I like to catch fish. I mean, I like to get more than everybody else is catching. I like to, feed my ego a little bit. But the bottom line is these fish will crush your ego. I mean, you could be your king one day and your pauper the next. So keep on going at it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'm usually pretty good at getting back to people. I'm not going to give you, coordinates to where to go to, but I'll be able to give you enough information to get you settled in. To me, this is not about booking trips. That happens on its own. This is about helping people catch fish and maybe learn something that we can share, or, just saying, hey, that really does work. It doesn't just work for me, but it works for somebody else. A lot of people think that when you're showing a bait up, right, that company's paying you money or giving you baits. I pay for these baits. The company is small enough where if I take baits for free, they're not going to be in business tomorrow. So I'm paying for these baits, right? I'm not saying they don't send me seconds, not saying I don't get perks like, some glam stuff, some hats, but I'm paying for these baits. So if I'm fishing it, it works.
And then the same with the gear you were talking about. If you have gear that survives 200 days on the water, then that gear is probably pretty.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there isn't other stuff outside of the Sims market that doesn't work, right? But I fished enough of it. I'm not going to name names because it's not the thing to do. But a lot of the stuff that you see that costs just as much didn't work for me. Well, maybe it's because I'm in the Northeast. Maybe it's because I'm driving my jet boat 35 to 45 miles per hour in rain, and it can't hold up to that stuff. I don't know. Even if the stuff says it's X not mile per hour gear, and it grows, right? So some of the stuff that I've gotten worked great for 2 years, and all of a sudden, when it rained, it's like I'm wearing a weight suit. Like I'm doing some kind of stamina training because my suit weighs 6,000 pounds. And then I get home and I'm soaked right through it. Even though I didn't feel it, even though the garments did what it was supposed to do and wick moisture away from me, I get home and I'm soaking wet. It's like, this is not going to work. This is just too dangerous. So I have not in 5 years. I still have my original Sims jacket plus probably 5 or 6 others in different, variety of thickness and cost. But I have not had a piece of garment that I didn't, I wore them out before they wore out by failing. So.
Cool. Well, again, guys, make sure you go out and check out Chris's Facebook page, Real River Adventures. That's real with REEL. You can see the stream at the bottom of the feed, but I'll also put it in the show notes as well. So definitely go out and check it out. If anything, just to follow and watch, check out the fish catches, because I'm telling you, it's almost a daily thing, and very impressive. But
we've had a couple of good years for sure.
But Chris, thanks again, man, for coming on and just, you're always willing to share knowledge. And I love people like that because there's so many, people who are maybe, I'm not sure what the best word is, but they don't feel like it's okay to reach out and ask. And
it is okay. Like I said, if I have something I have to keep private, I'm going to, right? But there's no reason why I can't set you in the right path if that's what you're looking for. And like I said, if you got, hundreds of people that want to go out and there's only so many days, like we talked about earlier, I'd rather just at least give you something that you can work with or give you some advice that can help you catch fish. And Susie, I hope you start feeling better because this is not the time of year to not feel good. And you need to get out there and catch some of those fish before the real winter gets here.
Well, Susie is just recovering from rotator cuff surgery too. So she's finally now, I think, probably able to get out on the water, but it's probably even colder where she is. She's in the Midwest somewhere. So
I'd rather have my knees operated on again than to have shoulder stuff. That's just terrible. Shoulder and elbows are not good things for fishing.
So I know she's chomping at the bit to get back out there just because of that, but let alone, because it's the start of the new season. So, but Susie, yes, we definitely wish you well, and look forward to having you back next week, hopefully. But Chris, thanks again for coming on. And guys, I'm hoping that maybe in the future, Chris and I can get together and do some actual content on the water. So
we're going to
be on the lookout for that. And I appreciate that offer. So I'm definitely super psyched to see what we can do with that too. So thanks again, man. And anything else before we finish the sign off?
Have a great new year. And guys, if you're catching stuff and you've learned something from this and it's working, I don't mind you sharing it. It's good for other people to see that, it's not about promoting somebody's stuff that does or doesn't work. If we're catching it on it, we're showing it. It's not like we're trying to put baits in fish's mouth. It's, that doesn't get anybody anywhere.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much. Guys, thanks again for tuning in. It's going to be a great 2023 and look forward to seeing what else we come up with, but we will catch you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode here on Paddle and Fin. Be sure to drop a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or smash that subscribe button on any platform you're listening in on. Be sure to check us out on Waypoint TV, waypointtv.com. Make sure you sign up for the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League at paddleandfin.com/fantasy. You can support this show through Patreon, patreon.com/paddleandfin. Don't forget to check out the website, paddleandfin.com. Catch us on YouTube. If you got a question, comment, or want to see a future guest on the show, be sure to email us at paddleandfin@gmail.com. Shout out to our show supporters, Yak Gadget. You can check out all the fine kayak accessories at yakgadget.com. Pelican Professional. For all your cases, coolers, and lighting needs, go to pelican.com. Rocktown Adventures. Your Midwest premier paddle sports destination. Go to rocktownadventures.com. Eastport Marina, the beautiful destination on Dale Hollow Lake. If you're looking for lodging, kayaks, kayak accessories, or anything fishing related on the beautiful Dale Hollow Lake, go to eastport.info. And Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and fill your tackle boxes today.